Our 35th project, Making Art Public, was really a celebration of our 50th anniversary. The 50th anniversary of Christo and Jean-Claude Repcoast. And the art gallery very kindly offered to host the exhibition and gave over most of the exhibition area on the ground floor. I didn't want a retrospective. I wanted to turn the 50-year celebration also into a project. The best way to do it was to commission an artist to look at it as a project and to have an artist's perspective, history of our past projects. And I called Michael Landy, an artist who I maintain a long friendship, and asked him would he be willing to basically create the exhibition. And he said yes. He really didn't know what he was letting himself in for. He came 3 times to Sydney. He really immersed himself into our archives. Michael is a beautiful draftsman, and each project, as he studied it, he drew it in his notebook. So every project had its own recording in an exercise book, Drawings by Michael Landy. A project in itself. And he came up with a brilliant idea. He conceived each project in an enlarged archive box, 4 meters by 4 meters. Now they weren't all the same, the size was all the same, but some were completely open, some were partially open, some were only on ground level, some were totally closed, with music or sound coming out from them. What was brilliant about it is that he disregarded the chronology. It was perfectly at random, and you wandered from one project to another. And I really enjoyed that, as you lost the time, and it gave the impression as if all projects happened simultaneously. And that's really the effect I wanted. So, as if all projects were there, present, recalled from the past. While there was no chronology, I took a lot of tours of visitors, of friends, of school groups, which I really enjoyed. And I sort of worked out a path which would be the most logical one. It went from, not the first, not from Christo, but it started with Gregor Schneider, then Richard Long, then Asad Raza, then Michael Landy, one of the more popular ones, where he reconceived his Act of Kindness project, and people could stick comments about what they considered act of kindness. But on top of the archive boxes, I wanted to do something which is immediate, which is current, so not only looking back. And we had a huge program. We commissioned 4 Australian artists to do a new work. One was Gothe-Snape, who did a work called Lion's Honey. That's an interesting story in itself. David Malouf suggested I should read a book called Lion's Honey by David Grossman. And I thought it was fantastic. It's a very short novel. And I gave it to Agatha to read. And she turned it into a project. So in the gallery, somebody else had to read it wherever they wanted within the exhibition space. And after that, they could read a book of their own choice. We had Iman Stillers do a new work, an homage to Christo, because actually Iman's worked on Christo's project. Ian Millers did a beautiful work, again reminiscent of Christo, because in 1969, inspired by Christo, he did a work on the rocks at Little Bay, and he created a new version at the gallery, which was absolutely beautiful. Alicia Frankovic created a new work, a performance, using people who were associated with past projects, who played their role. None of them were performers, none of them were dancers or actors, but she trained them to mimic, to work together, to demonstrate what their role was in the project. And that was also performed twice at the art gallery. I wanted the opening to be something really special. And I asked Anthony Miralda, who was our fourth project with the colored food. We stayed friends for nearly 50 years. And he came to Australia and he conceived a work called 5 Feastables. So there were 5 specially designed big round tables, each with different colored food, each lit differently. And as people walked in, they were given a specially designed and printed scarf by Miralda, and they could partake in the colored feast, in really a celebration of our anniversary. We had a big education and public program. It was the first time that the art gallery actually had a physical space for education, as I insisted that Michael should have a special room for education. And we had 3 artists over the life of the exhibition to design, to populate that space and put their handwriting on it. The first one was David Capra with his dachshund, Tina. And he insisted that we build, I think, a 3-meter replica of Jeff Koons' puppy, but instead the puppy, it was in the shape of a dachshund. And children could stick paper flowers and notes on the dachshund. We also created for pets outside the gallery a brunch, a feast, where people could bring their pets and they were given a special treat. So it was a real coming together, not only of art lovers, but also something for their pets. The next was Lucas Ilan, completely different. He brought a printing press to the education area, and he printed almost daily newsletters, commenting on the projects, commenting on the artist. Some of them quite controversial. The last one, and I think the most popular, was young artist Nadia Odlum, who beautifully transformed the space into a minimal, playful, sculptural area that both children and adults could construct different shapes. It was a great success. We had lots of public programs. We had every Wednesday evening talks. Michael Landy, Nicholas Chambers talked about the archives. We also had more intimate archive sessions where in the print room in the gallery, up to maybe a dozen people were invited to go through in detail of the archives. We reached out to a lot of schools, both within Sydney and regional. Our education team visited schools in Burke, in Wilcannia, Dulwich Hill, and discussed the project with the students, and some of them were later invited to make a presentation at the gallery. We also had every second Sunday movie marathons, showing films from Bill Viola, Marina Abramovich, Christo, Jeff Koons. So it really tried to demonstrate the whole scope of our activities over the 50 years. not only projects, but all the programs associated with it. I invited to come to Sydney people I have worked with for many years. Nicholas Baum from Public Art Funds in New York, James Lingwood from Art Angel, London, Jessica Morgan, who is now director of the DF Foundation in New York. They spoke at the Art Gallery. We were also invited by the Lord Mayor, Clover Moore, for a public talk at the Town Hall, which was a great experience, fully packed. It was coordinated by Virginia Trioli and Jonathan Jones, Bridget Smythe, Michael Landy, and myself. One of the things that really touched me, was closest to my heart, started about a year before the exhibition. We were approached by two residents of Little Bay, Karen Morris and Karen Firestone. And they suggested, why don't we do a letter drop and enlist the Randwick Council to find people who actually were at Little Bay, who witnessed the project, and to reawaken their memories. I thought that was a very good idea. We had a very good response, and we arranged a morning tea on the site, and perhaps 50, 60 people turned out, all with different memories. Some who were my age, but some a lot younger, because their parents brought them along as children, and they still had great memories of what they experienced. Michael Waite, who is our researcher, set about looking for living archives, people who saw our previous projects, not just Christo, but really up to the more recent. And because all our projects are temporary, it's really fascinating to hear what people remember, what people take away. I mean, there are so many cases where people met at a project, and I found that really very touching, because really that's all that remains of our projects. We also published a large book with all our archives, edited by Genevieve O'Callaghan and designed beautifully by Mark Going. As I said before, I think the gods of art smile on us, because we managed to finish the exhibition in February 2020, just before COVID hit. And I'm very happy the way it all came together, and we had the opportunity to celebrate our 50th anniversary.